news. Western Illinois University President WIU Wong has announced he will step down on March 31st, pending approval from the Board of Trustees. Wong was appointed as the university's 12th president in December of 2020. Board members say Wong presided over a record number of international students enrolling during his tenure. He also played a huge role in their athletic programs, transferring to the Ohio Valley Conference. The vice president of Quad Cities campus operations, Christy Mindrup, will serve as interim president starting April 1st.